Shalom, Shabbat Shalom to every single one of you. Thank you so much for joining me. And we're going to start our study right away because it's a little late here in Israel. I'm going to be heading home on Monday. And tomorrow is going to be my last day. I will be in Tel Aviv. And then after that, I'm going to be heading home with my wife and getting ready for the next tour. We're going to be coming back here again in February, God willing. So I'm really excited to be back. I'm going to be sharing the screen today. And I'm recording, so I want to only talk about chapter 29. Going to be chapter 28, I'm sorry. Chapter 28, we're going to be focusing about the Torah Portion Vayetze, and I'm going to touch on a few topics within the 1 hour, just trying to give you an insight about context from the cultural perspective, and maybe you heard me say some of these things before, but I just kind of wanted to repeat a few things and get used to the narrative when we study the ancient Near Eastern context of the Bible. Consider that, like John Walton says all the time, the Bible was not written to us. It was written for us, but not to us. So it requires trying to understand the, cultural background. If we do not understand the cultural background of the Bible, we're not going to understand its intended message. Okay? All right, so let's go to the dream. We're going to leave the whole issue with Rebecca, Leah, Jacob, and Esau. We're going to leave it behind. He is in the house of Laban. He's getting ready to go back to the land of Israel. And in chapter 28, he's going to Laban's house, I think it is. He's leaving Esau. He's leaving Isaac's house. He's going to go to Laban's house. And there he's going to make, before he goes up to Laban's house, which is in modern-day Syria, or North Iraq. He comes into a location in Jerusalem, and there he makes an oath. He has a promise, a covenantal oath. Many people, when you talk about the Bible, especially the story of Jacob, you must consider that an oath of a covenant was very important. And we'll talk a little bit about its cultural background. But just like we have come into a covenant with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, a covenantal relationship is measured by your obedience to the commandments and statutes established on the understanding of the agreement of the oath. And we're going to read verse 10 of chapter 28 all the way through to see what Jacob said. Then we will examine the consequences of him following through on his oath. You don't see the consequences until after he comes back 20 years later. So keep that in mind. When you make an oath, when you make a covenant, you are bound by your word to follow through on the covenant. No, just because Christmas is coming and just because you feel like you need to compromise it, you're going to mix it. If you make an oath to the God of Israel that you will proclaim his feast, you are not to observe anything other at the level of holiness at his feast. Okay, I'm talking about in the sense of anything that's related, that they try to relate it with the Bible. Like in this case, Christmas. No, we're not to have syncretism, mix holy and the profane. We're not supposed to do what the nations do. Well, when Jacob went to Laban's house, he went away from Israel, he went into the dispersion. Now, please understand, this is a foreshadow of the life of Israel. Israel as a whole, the nation, has always been in the diaspora, has always been in the dispersion, has always been in the, God is always trying to get his people to return. But for some reason, there's a dysfunctional family in which there's chaos within the family that causes Israel to disperse. In this case, it was the struggle between Esau and Jacob. That struggle between the two brothers created a family dysfunction that created a separation. Now, Jacob goes to the place where once Abraham lived. Abraham lived in the same area, went from went to Laban's house in that area, and then came to the land of Israel. Laban obviously stayed over there. He's looking for a bride. We know the story. But what we are going to focus is the covenant that he made before he went. And if we understand the significance of that covenant that he made before he went to the house of Laban, and we know the struggles that he went through in the house of Laban, We know the deceitfulness, the chaos that ensued in the house of Laban. Then when he returns, he did not really follow through on what he said he would do right away in this covenant. He went someplace else. He went to Shechem, and there he suffered chaos with his daughter and the war against the city of Shechem. Instead of going to Bethel, he was supposed to go to that place. Let's read it. When you go to Jacob's dream, then Jacob went out from Beersheba and to Haran, and he arrived at a certain place, Hamakom, the place. I believe that this particular word here is in reference to what we think is the temple, Hamakom. Makom, like for example, Har HaBait, the Temple Mount, the mountain of the temple, Har HaBait, or Habaita, the house, is also Ha-Makom, the place. So I used to believe it was the city of Bethel, but I no longer believe that. I believe that it was actually Moria. That's just my opinion. Okay? All right. But we could always continue to research and look into this. And there he spent the night, because the sun has set, and he took one stone of the place and put it under his head, and he slept at that place. He dreamt, and behold, a stairway was set on the earth, and on its top touched the heavens. Behold, the angels of God were going up and going down on it. Behold, the Lord was standing beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of of Abraham your father, of the God of Isaac. The ground on which you were sleeping, I will give to you. Now, the word they give is Natan. If you look at it, it's Natan. Okay? Et noten, see? Et noten, it's just a gift. Now, remember, the gifts of God are irrevocable. This is important that we understand that. So this is a gift. The land is a gift to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob based on the covenantal relationship that got made in Genesis 15, okay? So no one can take it away. So you got to remember that. It's a gift. Your descendants shall be like the dust of the earth, and you will be spread out to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. And the same blessing in Genesis 15, he tells them here, and all the families of the earth will be blessed through you and through your descendants. Okay? Now behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go. Now God is saying, I'll make a covenant with you like I made it with Abraham, and Isaac. And now you, Israel, you're going to be Jacob. I will bring you to this land, and I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised to you. Then Jacob woke up in his sleep, and he said, surely Adonai is indeed in this place. I did not know. Then he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place, Hamakom. And this is nothing else than the house of God, Bethel. Okay? And this is the gate of heaven. Very important. What does it mean by this? Let's go to the Sundervan Illustrated Bible Commentary, and let's talk about this. Okay? He was sent out to Haran, and in verse 12, he is talking about the stairway. Now, from the commentary, it says this: from the fact that the messengers of God appear passing between the realms of, he says, the realms in Jacob's dream, it is clear that he is viewing a portal to heaven. Such portals are envisioned in stairways as opposed to ladders. Ancient mythology, okay, they are also architecturally represented in a ziggurat in ancient Mesopotamia, which were built to provide the stairway for the gods to come down and be worshipped in their temples. Jacob is not seeing a ziggurat, but he is seeing a stairway portal between heaven and earth that ziggurats were designated to provide. We should not imagine that the angels he sees are marching in procession down and up. In stairway is often pictured in art. Rather, he sees messengers like angels going off on missions and returning, delivering the message. Now, let me show you what that is. Let me show you a ziggurat. Now this, I'm going to share it again. It will not let me share all of them. This is a ziggurat. This is from the Ancient Near Eastern Bible Lands Museum in Jerusalem. I was just there last week. And this is a ziggurat. Now, the ziggurat is a stepstone type building. They believe that the top of the building right here was actually a little house for the God that will come down to meet with the people. Okay, so remember, they're thinking in the ancient mindset. So here you have to consider the way they believed things back in the day. Just like the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel was actually something like a ziggurat. They're building it to make themselves known, to make themselves a great name. That's why God did not like what they were doing. Building of this was not a problem. It's not really a temple. All it is a place that they believed that the gods would come down and meet with the people. Okay. But the fact that during the time of Babel, the Tower of Babel, was they were creating it, making it so they can make themselves a great name, when in fact humanity is created to make God's name great. So when we look into the story of Jacob, he's seeing something that his father would have understood what it meant. The difference is the location. They believed that in the Mesopotamia, that was the center of humanity. That was the center of all of creation there in Mesopotamia. God is letting Jacob know that it is not the place where Abraham came from. It's actually the place where he put his head, where he slept, that God showed him. That's the gate of heaven. That's the communication between heaven and earth. That's why the temple ended up in that location, because I believe that place was Bethel. Okay, I'm having a tough time here. It's not letting me. So give me 1 second. I'm going to move on to something else here. Okay, so that way we can continue. So let's continue the commentary here real quick. I'm trying to figure out how to do this so that I can multiply. Okay, so I could share them all at the same time, but it's not letting me. All right, so we go to the Bible commentary. Let's continue our reading. It says, the house of God, the gate of heaven. The portals mentioned in the previous comments were considered sacred space. The link between heaven and earth provided passage for the deity from the gate of his heavenly temple palace to the sacred space marked out on earth for his presence and worship. Such places were marked with temples on their location have been revealed to people living in the area. Okay, so if you study everything about gateway to heaven, then you understand that what Jacob saw was literally this is God's sacred space. This is the point of creation. It's not Mesopotamia. Very important concept that we need to understand this, okay? Now, when you continue reading in the story of Jacob, you're going to notice that he does something very peculiar, okay? Let me read it here. When you go down in verse 17, then he was afraid. He says, how awesome is this place? This is nothing else but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. And Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up as a stone pillar and poured oil on top of it. And he called that place Bethel. However, the name of the city was formerly Luz. And Jacob made a vow. Okay, let me see what the word vow means here. Okay, the word vow is important because the word vow is either neder or shvu'ah. Neder or shvu'ah. In this case, neder. Okay, he made a solemn vow or promise. Now, when you make a promise to God, you have to follow through with it, because you use the name of God to validate your oath. That's how using the name of God in vain comes into play. When Jacob made this vow, he made it in the name of the God of Abraham and Isaac, and now the God of Jacob. So he swore that he would literally, okay, something quit on me here. I don't know what it is. Okay. Hold on, guys. Okay. He swore that he literally would, everything's going crazy here. Okay. He swore using God's name, and I'm speaking a little low because people next door, they're living next door. But he swore using God's name. When in the 10 Commandments, when it says you should not take the name in vain, it's always in legal matters, especially when you take a vow. When you make an oath, you use God's name. Therefore, you have to follow through on the oath if you do not follow through on the oath, and you do not honor what you promise that you will do, then you shame God's name, and then judgment will come. Maybe this is the reason why Jacob, when he went to Shechem, and there he dwelt for a little bit, and then his daughter got in trouble and the family got dysfunctional, and then after that he went to Bethel. Maybe that's one of the reasons why that happened, because he didn't go exactly to the place when he told God he would do it. He will go back to that place. Okay, and to that point, God blessed him. Even when Laban tried to deceive him, God blessed him, protected him, multiplied his goats and sheep and gave him 4 wives and all that stuff. Okay, so let's move on. It says in verse 20, and Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me and protect me on this way that I am going, and gives me food to eat and clothing to wear, and if I return in peace to the house of my father, then the Lord will become my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar shall be the house of God. And of all that you give me, I will certainly give you a tenth. Now, it's not until later, guys, that you see something very significant. Jacob, he gave a tribute to Esau. In chapter 32 and 33, when he's afraid of Esau and he has to fight with the angel, and then he takes a whole bunch of money and he gives a tribute, and then he bows down 7 times. There was something considered scrapping. Bowing and scrapping in the ancient Near East. And I have the article, but it's interesting because when you will bow from afar, you are showing submission to that person as if that person is going to be your master. And it says he bowed down 7 times. When you go to the Bible, you see it right there. Jacob bowed down from afar. He kept bowing down all the time. And in the chapter, he calls Esau a master, I think like 6 or 7 times. Go back and validate that for me, okay? But it's interesting because what we need to remember, if you make a vow, you cannot break it. And you cannot take your the promise that you made in your vow, that you will give a tenth, you give a tithe, a tenth of everything he's given you. And right before he came into the land, he gave that money to Esau because he was afraid. After the angel told him he'll be okay. Maybe this is the reason why chaos ensued, because you don't give God's tribute to another king. Abraham, however, Abraham never took a bribe from anybody else. He never took a tribute from anyone else. As a matter of fact, when the king of Sodom wanted to give Abraham spoils from the war, what did Abraham says? No, I will not take anything from you, for I have raised in my hand in an oath that I will not take even a sandal strap from you. So Abraham was loyal to the blessings and the promise God gave him. I think Jacob, in this case, didn't follow through on his complete belief that God will protect him. And when he encountered Esau, he was willing to give his inheritance that he has worked for all the way in the house of Laban to give it to somebody else. Something that we need to consider when we look into this biblical narrative is context, context, context. Okay? All right, let's continue. So, when you start reading here, this is verse 22. And the stone that I have set up as a pillar shall be in the house of God, and all of that you have given me, I will certainly give you a tenth. Now, when you go back and you study pillars, set up a pillar and pour oil on top of it. In the ancient world, cult symbols such as pillar set up here are abundantly observable. For example, Avner has documented 142 independent sites featuring standing stones in the Negev and the eastern Sinai alone. An additional 36 have been identified in Iron Age Israel. These standing stones could at times be deified or considered to contain the essence of a deity. In this case, it's only a sign of a covenant, okay? But they would used to use it as a sign that the God was there, okay? It says these standing stones could at times be deified. Probably the function of the two found in the vicinity of the Iron Age temple on earth at Israelite Arad, others believed to represent ancestral spirits, whereas Others could simply stand as memorials of treaties or special events. Okay? Because Moses set up 12 stones in Exodus 24, verse 4 through 8. And Moses wrote all these words of the Lord. And he rose up early in the morning and he built an altar at the base of the mountain. He set up 12 memorial stones for 12 tribes of Israel. Now remember, he made it for a covenantal relationship. So in this, that's why maybe we are going to be a stone in God's temple, because we are part of a covenantal relationship. So in the ancient Near East, raising up a stone, making an oath, pouring oil on it was a sign of a covenant between you and the God who appeared to you. Now he cannot break that covenant. This is an example. You can find this also in the museum, Jerusalem Museum, standing stone of Gezer, okay? And you can see what they look like. Now it's interesting because I want to show you something quite interesting. Eli Shukron, I'm going to find the picture here, so give me a minute. Eli Shukron, he took us, I don't know if you know who Eli Shukron is. Eli Shukron, I'm going to show you the picture here. Okay, so I got to share and unshare and things like that. Okay, this gentleman right here is Eli Shukron. Eli Shukron is actually the gentleman who found the Shiloh, the pool of Siloam, okay, in 2004. He is the one who actually found what he calls a temple in the above the Gihon Springs, that he called it the Melchizedek temple. It has nothing to do with the Jerusalem temple, but he just called it that because he believed that area, Salem, was the area where Melchizedek lived, the one in the Bible. Okay. This is a cistern that my tour went into. No one can go there. This is not for the public, okay? But I'm going to continue to move forward because I want you to see something that he showed us. We're in the city of David. Now, he is one of the most renowned archaeologists in the city of David. Now, the way you see people go walking down, no one can go down there because that was the archaeological site that he started. He's a guide now, but he was the archaeologist on other continuing the work. And what you're about to see, he discovered. What you see down there are rooms where they believed that there was some kind of temple there before David got to that city during the Jebusite period and before the Jebusite period. And the archaeologist, Eli Shukron, he believes that Shem or Melchizedek, in this case, they believe Melchizedek was Shem, that actually lived there, which would make sense because he's a priest of the Most High. So back in the day, they used to have temples. More than likely, this was a temple to the god of Shem or Melchizedek, which was the god of creation, but it was not on the top of the mountain. This has nothing to do with it, okay? Let's move on. He's showing us the different chambers that he discovered, telling us what they're for. But one of the things that he showed me, and I'm going to show you here real quick, is on the next one over. This is for the grain. They used to do wine and oil and grain. This is for the oil. And there's a chamber that I'm going to show you here right now, this one. He found a type of an altar with a stone as a memorial. That's really interesting because in the story of Genesis, it talks about Jacob establishing a stone and putting anointing oil on it, oil on that, and setting up a sacred space. That means that the area that he did that in was sacred space, as this was sacred space to the people of the Jebusites back in the time. Now think about this, because in the time of David, this is right above the Gihon Springs. It's right below, okay? And in the story of David, you see Zadok, is the priest, son of Aaron, Zadok, who anointed Solomon right in this spot. Okay, this is the place where he anointed Solomon, right in this spot. Now, there were no sacrifices here because the tabernacle at the time of David was located in Givon, about 2 miles north. But the Ark of the Covenant was in the city of David, and I am of the opinion that the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, probably, maybe, could have been in this location. Okay, so that's just my opinion. And this is Eli Shukron. showing us the latest discoveries that is not open to the public. We had to pay for him to go, okay? And it's definitely worth it. The best 3.5, 4 hours that we had one-on-one with him on my tour. And this is what he thinks, a rendering of what he thinks it looked like back in the day. It had an altar, it had chambers, they could keep an animal here, they had the grain, and they had everything they needed to make a small temple back in the time of the Jebusites function, okay? So therefore, this is how archaeology connects with a lot of the biblical narratives that we're reading in the book of Genesis. Remember, this would have been in the time of Jacob. This would have been a little town. It's a Jebusite city. This was all the way from the Iron Age. It was, Bronze Age and Iron Age, all the way from that time frame. So there's nothing new under the sun. We are now getting archaeology connected with biblical narrative, but we cannot say that Jacob was there. What we can say is that we, based on the evidence that we have, that there was a temple there before David, before anybody else, before the temple was on the Temple Mount. Hopefully that'll make sense. Is this making sense to you guys? Give me a yes or no on the chat so I know you're with me. Okay. Yes, no. Yes, no. Good. Okay, cool. By the way, this was one of the highlights on my tour because we went to places that no other tour can go, or it's not open to the public. So I got the great contact now with some really cool archaeologists that have really, we're slowly befriending each other. And it's really cool because I'm learning a lot. And I got to thank my teacher, Joseph Good. Without the favor of the Lord and having a teacher like Joseph Good, I wouldn't have a lot of access to any of these places because it was of him. Because of him, I've been able to meet them. So the Lord is good by putting some good people in my life, All right, so let's continue. Let's continue to the text. Okay, so this says, in early Israelite history, such stones were acceptable. But as the time progressed, they were more inclined to serve the same function as images, and they were rejected along with the idea that deities can inherit in a physical object. This explains why some pillars were innocent enough and legitimate, while others represented apostasy. Most standing stones were unhewn, though some had minimal adornment, carved hands and reaching upward, and a few had intricate relief. Okay, so they stopped using the standing stones because people began to worship them. Now, let me go here real quick. I'm going to talk a little bit about the vow. Okay, vows in the ancient world. Vows in the ancient world generally involve a request made of deity with a promise of a gift in return when the request is fulfilled. The request often, by the way, you can get more information about that from T.W. Cartledge, Vows in the Hebrew Bible and the Ancient Near East. It's an amazing article. I've read it, and you can learn a lot about ancient covenants using a vow. So anytime you hear anything that says making a vow or swearing in my great name, when you hear the prophets that God says, for I have raised my hand and oath that I will regather the sons of Israel, that means that God has to follow through on his vow. When I understood the importance of vows and oath in the ancient Near East, my life changed, because then I knew that whatever God has promised, that he made a vow in the Bible, must come true. If it doesn't come true, then he is not the true God. And everything he has promised, everything he vowed, everything he said has come true and will come true, because his character is righteous, he is just, and he is not a son of man that he should lie. So I truly believe that all these things will come true based on all the evidence we have so far. Let's continue. The request often concerned protection or provision, and the gift was typically a sacrifice or donation in the sanctuary of the deity. The details in this chapter conform to the pattern. God has promised protection and provision and return to the land. So Jacob makes those the conditions of his proffered gift, a tithe of all that he acquired during his absence. Wealth and possessions in the ancient world were not based on money. So Jacob expects to gain flocks and herds Though tithe could at times be a form of taxation, this tithe is not imposed on Jacob. Gifts related to vows were usually given to the temple, whether by means of a sacrifice or donation. But in this case, it will have to be by sacrifice, because donations must be handed over to temple administrators. There is no formal temple here. Jacob's returned to Bethel to fulfill his vow in Genesis 35. And presumably, animals are sacrificed at that time. Though the text does not say so, Jacob builds an altar in Genesis 35:1. And God said to Jacob, "Arise, go to Bethel and dwell there, and make an altar to the God who appeared to you when you fled from before Esau to your brother." Okay? So therefore, he built an altar, and we can assume, based on him building an altar, that then he had to put the sacrifices on the altar. But remember, he gave a gift to Esau already. When you keep going, let me move on here. And I'm not going to talk about him going up there for the 20 years and know the issue with Leah, Rebecca, and all those people. We're going to cover that later. We don't have time today. But I want to go all the way down to Genesis 35. Okay? The encounter with Esau. In Genesis 32, okay? He encounters Esau. Give me, okay, selected a gift. He says, listen to what it says. And he lodged there that night, and he took from what he had with him a gift for Esau, his brother. Wait a minute. He took from what he had with him, but he promised the first fruit of that. Take the 10th of that to God. But he encountered Esau because he was afraid, and he gave him a gift of what he should have given the first gift to God first. And then how much was it? Jacob's gift served several functions, but above all are to indicate to Esau that Jacob is not interested in taking anything that Esau may have inherited. The gift of 220 goats, 220 sheep, 30 camels, plus their young, 50 cows, bulls, 30 donkeys is generous. It is larger than many towns, and could have been able to pay in tribute to conquering kings even at later dates. Do you see what I'm saying? He gave him a lot. I'm sorry, but if he was that rich, that should have been God's tribute. He gave it to Esau. How many of you have never considered that before? Be active in the chat so that way I know. But how many of you have never considered that maybe the chaos that Jacob encountered in the land was due to his lack of commitment and breaking the vow? Remember what happens when you break a vow? Chaos comes. There are curses and blessings in everything you do. You cannot take an oath and a vow loyalty to God and then do whatever you want to do and not be loyal to the Lord. This is important, guys. We need to remember that this story is trying to give us a principle. It's teaching us that we are now submitted under the authority of the God of Israel, because we believe that God raised up Yeshua and that we have accepted Yeshua as our master. Not that Yeshua over the Father. We believe that God the Father resurrected his Son, and now we accept Yeshua as the master because the Father has given him the authority, the power, and the honor to rule on the earth in the future. But now we take our tribute, we take our donations, and we give it to God and the people who he said to give it to, the Levites and the priests, to the needy and to the poor, not to people who are not teaching you the Torah. This is very important. So let me go here real quick to a PowerPoint that I have, so that, and I only have maybe about another 20 minutes. I'm limited in time. I don't want to talk too loud because there's people sleeping next door, but I wanted to share something with you today. And I want to spend some time because I know some of you, go into my teachings, and I have not been active in the last 4 Saturdays because I've been traveling, okay? But what we need to remember is the struggles that Jacob is having is due, because, in my opinion, because he did not follow through on his oath. He took the best that he had and he gave it to his brother because of fear. And that ministers to us. Sometimes we're afraid of life. We're afraid of the enemy. We're afraid of circumstances. We're afraid of whatever. And we take our best and our time and what belongs to God and we give it to something else. We have to be careful because we live for the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay? We live for him. We cannot give our best to something other than God first. That's a principle that, is applicable through every age. We belong to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We must be loyal to him above anything else. We must be loyal to him. Let me move on here. I want to take you to something really interesting that I want to share with you about his sons. Okay, a little bit about adoption. Now, we can assume that Laban did not have any boys. Laban did not have any boys. Let's go to Genesis 29:6 says, and he said unto them, is he well? And they said, he is well, and behold, Rachel, his daughter, cometh with the sheep. Now, back in the day, only the boys took care of the sheep as shepherds, unless the father of the house did not have sons, like in the priest of Midian. Midian, he had Moses' wife. They had 7 daughters. There were no boys. So I'm assuming, because later on in the story, you're going to have that Laban wants the inheritance back, the firstborn blessing. Okay. Now, back in the ancient world, if you don't have any daughters, you can adopt somebody and give them one of your daughters for as a dowry or as a wife, so you can maintain the inheritance of the father within the family structure. So you would adopt, in this case, Laban would adopt Jacob. You are bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, your family. You adopt them, then you give him a daughter, right? You make him his son. If he had no boys, now he receives the blessing, a double blessing, right? But Laban knew the law of the time. Okay, so we're assuming here that Laban apparently had no sons when Jacob first joined his household in Genesis 29. Laban's sons were presumably born between that time. If you read in Genesis 31:41, okay, and let me look it up here. Genesis 31:41. Let's go there real quick. Genesis 31:41. And I want to get it because I want to validate this. Genesis 31:41. Next week, I'm going to be back home, so we'll be able to do some more stuff. 31:41. And the Lexham Bible says this: these 20 years I have been in your house. I served 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. 31:41, right? But if you go 31:1, 31:1 says, now he heard the words of the sons of Laban. Sons of Laban. Could it be possible that when Jacob got to Laban's house, he had no children, no boys? Remember this. He was there 20 years. What if boys were born after that? What do you do if you adopt Jacob? What do you do if you give him one of your daughters? Okay, and that's what we're going to be talking about. It says Laban agrees to give a daughter in marriage to Jacob in Genesis 29:19. Our thesis that Laban simultaneously adopted Jacob is born out by a remarkable similarity to the Nusi tablets. Watch this. Let me read the verses and then we go to the evidence. And Laban said to him, surely you are bone of my flesh, my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him in the space of a month. And Laban said to Jacob, because you are my brother, should thou therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall my wages be? And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Right? Now, Law 56. This is by Neufeld. Ancient Hebrew marriage in ancient laws 56, Neufeld will serve as a basis of discussion. He states the main characteristic of the Irebu marriage, that's the name in Akkadian, Irebu marriage, was that the father who had no son, but only a daughter or daughters, selected a husband for his daughters upon the basis that his son-in-laws should enter his house and continue his family as a true son. In effect, the father-in-law adopted him. He goes on to point out, although the man was adopted and became a resident member of his wife's family, he was not immediately released from the obligation to discharge the mohar, bride payment, that he needed to pay a dowry. Okay, I adopt you, but you still need to give me a dowry, okay? The difference between these and the mohar marriage lay in the fact that the discharge was affected by service. So Jacob served 7 years and then 7 more years. The actual marriage as not fully established until after the expiration of the period of service equivalent to the mohar or the dowry, okay? Now, the old Babylonian text often thought to support the notion of a ruble message. That's what it's called in the Akkadian, in the laws of Eshnunna, number 25, okay, which is translated by A. Golsish. It says as follows: if a man offers to serve in the house of his father-in-law or his father-in-law, and his father-in-law takes him in bondage, but nevertheless gives him his daughter to another man, then the father of the girl shall refund the bride money which he received twofold. Now, if you keep reading the story in Genesis, the reason why Rachel took the terrapins, the family gods, was because she said that the Laban took their money away. And the ancient Near East, they used to have a dowry from the husband to be, and also the father will give the daughter a dowry. So she get a double dowry in case she will be divorced, she will have enough money to support herself. But in this case, Laban took all the money, what he was supposed to give them, and also what Jacob gave them. Okay, so he deceived them both. Is this making sense? I hope it is. All right. Adoption of a man as son and son-in-law in the ancient Near East, okay? There are few extant texts where a man was adopted as a son and then required to marry the adopter's daughter. In most of these documents, a clause, listen to this, a clause was included that states the adopted son-in-law may not take another wife if his first wife bears him no children. With the inclusion of this clause, the adopter intends for his property to pass to his own daughter's children, not to a stranger woman's children. Most of these types of adoptions are from the tablets from the Nusi and Arabia areas. Some examples are given as follows. Okay, this is an example. It says, adoption tablets of Paitila, son of Netesub. He gave his son Arimatka for adoption to Galipukur, son of Anatu. Moreover, Galiputur gave his daughter Taduni in marriage to Arimatka. Thus declare, Galipukur, I have adopted Arimatka, my lands, my buildings, my earnings. He shall have joint ownership with them. With my daughter Arimatka shall bear the feudal duties of the field. In other words, this follows exactly the way the story of Jacob, Leah, and Rachel, and Laban follows exactly the way they used to do business back in the ancient world. It's amazing to me when I read this. If to Galipukur should be born a son, listen to this. You can just substitute Arimatka for Leah or Rachel. I'm sorry, Jacob. Galipukur will be Lavan. Okay. Taduni will be like Rachel in this case. and then you marry them, you get everything because you become adopted and you become father. Now watch this. If Gali Pukur should be born a son in his own from his own for born a son of his own from his wife, he shall be chief heir and shall receive his inheritance share of the land. If Gali Pukur should not have a son of his own, my daughter shall divide with Arimaka. Remember, Gali Pukur, in this case, is Laban. Okay? If he doesn't have a son, he gives it to his daughter. But if he has a son, then his son has the inheritance. If Arimaka is the chief heir, he shall receive a double share. Okay? Arimaka shall receive a share of the buildings of the land. If Taduni bears a son, and Arimaka nevertheless takes another wife, then he shall take those belongings which are his and go out of the house. He cannot take a second wife. So in this case, Taduni becomes Leah or Rachel, in this case, Rachel. But Laban gave him another wife. Laban gave him Leah instead of Rachel. By doing that, he nullifies his inheritance. And now he stayed after working on his own. Another example, in this tablet, the adopter, after declaring the adoption of a son-in-law and the marriage to his daughter, was aiming to assure the non-alienability of his property after his death, so that all of it will be inherited eventually by his own grandchildren. Okay, so the story of Jacob and Laban in light of the Nusi tablets by Cyrus Gordon. Okay, here we go. You ready? I know this is a little technical, but we need to understand this because the Bible was written for us, but not to us. Okay? All right, so give me 1 second here. So it says this, adoption tablet of Naswi, son of Arseni. He adopted Wulu, son of Puizeni. As long as Naswi lives, Wulu shall give him food and clothing. When Naswi dies, Wulu shall be the Ewuru heir. He's going to be the firstborn blessing. If Naswi should have a son of his own, then said son shall divide equally with Wulu. However, the son of Naswi shall receive the gods of Naswi. Here you go. Shall receive the gods of Naswi. But if Naswi should not have a son of his own, then Wulu himself shall receive the gods of Naswi. Furthermore, he has given his daughter Nauya as a wife to Wulu. If Wulu takes another wife, he shall forfeit the fields, the house of Naswi. Whoever violates the agreement shall pay 1 mina of silver and 1 mina of gold. What in the world does all this means? Naswi and Wulu and all that stuff. There were laws to protect the inheritance. I'm going to break it down this way quickly and we'll be done. There were laws to protect the inheritance of the family. If I have a daughter, I have no sons, or I have 3 daughters, and I have no sons, and a young man comes in, I want him to stay, my inheritance to stay within my house. So what I'll do, I adopt him. The moment I give him my daughter as a wife, then the inheritance stays within the grandchildren of the family, my inheritance. He is not allowed to marry a woman from the outside. If he does, he forfeits all the inheritance here. Laban given another wife, although it's from the same family, give him another wife. Break some of these rules from the ancient world. That's why Jacob had to work extra. But how do we know this is true? Because you saw in the last passage that I gave you from the ancient Near East, in which they take the family gods. They're called therapins. The therapins, you have family gods, community laws, gods, national gods. And in this case, the reason why Rachel, she took with her the family gods was because they represented the inheritance. Let me show it to you in the ancient Near Eastern text by by Pritchard. Let me go back here. Show you what they look like. Here we go. This is what they would have looked like. The terrapins, ancestor image. So I want to read it to you. It says, terrapin and family gods. There are a variety of opinions about the terrapin, and there probably were various practices with regards to whether these ancestors were worshipped or considered to have a quasi-divine status. Minimally, ancestor images provide a focus for rites related for the care of the dead and also were at times used in divination. In some of the archives from the mid-second millennium BC, legal documents allow us to see how the family gods figured in the inheritance. And Nusi, I always quote the Nusi tablets because that's the area where Jacob lived for 20 years. At Nusi, several tablets indicate that the principal heir received the family gods. In text from Emar, one document suggests that the household gods were not to be given to a man outside the family. Rachel will have no right to this portion of the inheritance, nor would Jacob. Laban is logically distressed over the breach of inheritance practices, as well as concerned that the care of the ancestors will be jeopardized by the loss of their images. The family gods were not only the tie between the family unit and its property, but also the very family of the very heart of the family. Okay. Now, what's interesting is later on in the story of Jacob, when they encounter Esau, when they go to Shechem, they have the war, then what does Jacob says? Jacob goes to Bethel, finally goes to Bethel, and he tells everyone in his camp, put away your strange gods, put away your images. Those were terrapins. They were family gods that guaranteed, the people that came down with them, guaranteed their inheritance where they came from. And Jacob is telling them, if you're going to be here with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you cannot look back to where you came from. You have to you got to hide them here. You got to put them in the hole over here and forget about your inheritance where you came from, because now you're in a covenantal relationship with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he is the one who's going to give you all that you need. So it's not like Rachel. I used to teach that Rachel fell into idolatry, and I was wrong. When I began to study this, the reason why she took it is basically an affront to her father, because her father deceived them and deceived Jacob. So one way to get back to her father was, I'm going to take the family gods. So you are not able to give your family gods to your sons that were born later. And now you're going to have to deal with that mess over there when you get back. So everything has a meaning. Everything has a story behind the narrative. We owe it to ourselves to validate, to seek, to search, and to investigate all of these matters so that the Bible will become more clear to us, and then we'll have more clarity about what the Lord is trying to tell us through all of these stories. Amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you guys. I'm only going to keep it to 1 hour. It's late. It's almost 11 o'clock here at night, but I'm happy and delighted to share the Torah with you. Hopefully this short teaching will be challenging to some of you that are here for the first time, and that would allow you to review if you heard it before. But if you haven't, let's look at the ancient Near East. It will change your life. Shalom to all of you. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.